The ballroom lights dimmed, and every guest turned toward the grand piano at the center of the stage. Alessandro Fabri stood near the back wall, a glass of wine in his hand, half listening to a senator's wife talk about her new charity foundation. He was tired. Galas like this one had become routine after 25 years, another night of smiling faces and empty conversation. Then the pianist walked out. She was an older woman, maybe in her 50s, wearing a simple black dress. Her silver hair was pinned back neatly, and her hands trembled slightly as she took her seat at the piano. Nobody in the room knew her name. The famous singer who was supposed to perform that night had cancelled only hours earlier, and the event planner had scrambled to find a replacement. This woman, a pianist who sometimes played at the hotel lobby downstairs, had offered to fill in. Alessandro barely glanced at her. He set down his glass and turned back to the senator's wife, ready to nod along to whatever she said next. Then the woman placed her fingers on the keys. The first note rang out through the ballroom, soft and clear. Then the second note followed, and the third. Alessandro's body went still. His glass, forgotten in his hand, tilted slightly, and a few drops of wine spilled onto the marble floor. He did not notice. He knew this melody. He knew every note of it, every pause between the notes, every small rise and fall. It was not a famous song. It was not something she could have learned from a book or heard on the radio. 25 years ago, in a small apartment above a bakery, a young man and a young woman had written this melody together, laughing as they made mistakes and started over, again and again, until it finally sounded right. They had promised each other that no one else would ever hear it. It was theirs alone. Alessandro's chest tightened. He turned slowly toward the stage, his eyes fixed on the woman at the piano. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears, louder than the music, louder than the murmurs of the crowd around him. It could not be her. She had been gone for 25 years. He had searched every city, spent more money than he could count, and in the end, he had been told the truth he never wanted to hear. She was dead. He had grieved her. He had built walls around his heart so thick that no one had gotten close to him since. And now, this stranger, this pianist he had never seen before tonight, was playing the one song that only one person on earth should have known. He pushed past the senator's wife without a word of apology and walked toward the stage, his legs moving before his mind had caught up. Guests glanced at him, confused by the sudden change in his expression. Alessandro Fabri was known for his calm face, his steady voice, his complete control in every room he entered. Tonight, for the first time in years, that control had shattered. He stopped a few feet from the stage, staring up at her. Her fingers kept moving across the keys, her eyes closed, lost in the music. There was something familiar in the shape of her face, in the curve of her jaw, in the small furrow between her brows when she concentrated. Older now, softer around the edges, but unmistakably her. Clara. The name rose in his throat before he could stop it, but no sound came out. He simply stood there, frozen, watching the woman he had buried in his heart 25 years ago bring their song back to life in front of 200 strangers. If you are enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories like this to life. The final note faded into silence. The room erupted into polite applause, guests rising from their seats, some wiping tears from their eyes without knowing why the music had moved them so deeply. Clara opened her eyes and gave a small, humble bow. Then she looked up, and her gaze landed directly on Alessandro. For a moment, something flickered across her face, a flash of confusion, as if some small, buried part of her recognized him too. But then it was gone, replaced by the polite, distant smile of a woman greeting a stranger. "Thank you for having me," she said gently. "I hope I did the song justice." Alessandro opened his mouth, but no words came. The woman standing in front of him did not know who he was. 25 years ago, Alessandro Fabri was a different man. He was younger, hungrier, still learning the weight of the family business his father had left behind. But none of that mattered to him back then, not when he was with Clara. They had met by accident, in a small bakery near the harbor. Clara worked behind the counter, wrapping bread in brown paper, humming songs to herself while she worked. Alessandro had come in only to buy coffee, but he stayed for an hour, then two, just to hear her laugh at his terrible jokes. She had no idea who his family was, and for once, he did not want her to know. With Clara, he was not a name people whispered about in fear. He was simply Alessandro, a young man who could not stop smiling around her. Their romance grew slowly, the way real things do. Evening walks along the harbor. Quiet dinners in her tiny apartment above the bakery. She played piano in the little church down the street on Sundays, and he would sit in the back pew just to watch her hands move across the keys. One night, she taught him a simple melody, and together they added to it, note by note, until it became something entirely their own. They called it their song. No one else ever heard it. A year into their romance, Alessandro proposed to her on that same harbor where they first fell in love, under a sky full of stars. Clara said yes before he even finished the question, tears streaming down her face. Soon after, she discovered she was pregnant. Alessandro remembered the way her hands shook when she told him, half from fear, half from joy. He had never felt so certain of anything in his life. He was going to marry her, raise their child, and somehow build a life that kept her far from the darker parts of his world. Then, one evening, she simply vanished. Alessandro came to her apartment to bring her flowers, the way he did every Friday, and found the door unlocked, her coat still hanging by the entrance, dinner half prepared on the stove. There was no note, no sign of struggle that he could see at first glance, only silence where her voice should have been. He searched for her with everything he had. He questioned everyone who knew her, paid private investigators from 3 different countries, and used every connection his family's name could buy. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Rumors reached him eventually, second-hand and cruel, that Clara had been taken by men who crossed paths with his family, men who wanted to send a message. Other rumors said she had simply left him, frightened of the life he led and the danger it carried. He never learned which version, if either, was true. All he knew, after 5 long years of searching, was a final report that told him what he had feared most: Clara was gone, and she was never coming back. He grieved in the only way he knew how. He threw himself into his father's business, hardened by loss, determined never to feel that kind of pain again. Over the next 2 decades, Alessandro Fabri became a name people respected and feared in equal measure. He built an empire, made countless enemies, and buried countless of his own men. But he never remarried. He never fell in love again. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Clara remained exactly as he last remembered her, young and laughing, humming songs behind a bakery counter. What Alessandro never knew was the truth. Clara had not left him, and she had not been killed by his enemies. She had been taken, yes, but not for the reasons anyone whispered. A rival family, hoping to weaken Alessandro's father through fear rather than violence, had kidnapped her, intending to use her as leverage. Something had gone wrong. During her captivity, Clara suffered a severe blow to the head, an injury that stole away pieces of her memory, piece by piece, until entire years of her life disappeared completely. She escaped months later, disoriented and alone, unable to remember her own name, let alone the man she loved or the child growing inside her. She built a new life from nothing, guided only by fragments of instinct and a strange, aching feeling that something important had once been taken from her. She never understood what that feeling meant. She simply carried it with her, quietly, for 25 years, the way one carries an old scar that no longer hurts but never fully fades either. Now, standing in a glittering ballroom, Alessandro looked at the woman who had haunted every quiet moment of his life for 25 years, and he understood, with a pain sharper than anything he had felt before, that the woman standing in front of him did not remember any of it at all. Alessandro could not sleep that night. He sat in the study of his estate, a glass of untouched whiskey on the desk beside him, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. Her face. Her hands on the piano keys. The polite, empty smile she had given him, a smile meant for a stranger. By morning, he had made up his mind. He would find her again, properly this time, and he would not let her disappear a second time. It was not difficult to track her down. The hotel's event planner remembered her name easily enough. Clara Bellini, a piano teacher who lived a quiet life in a small house on the edge of the city, gave lessons to children after school, and occasionally played at events like the one 2 nights before. Alessandro's driver, Renzo, a broad-shouldered man who had worked for the Fabri family for over 15 years, gave him a careful look when Alessandro asked to be taken to the address. "You sure about this, boss?" Renzo asked. He had never seen Alessandro this shaken, not even during the worst years of the business. "I have never been more sure of anything," Alessandro said quietly. Clara answered her own door, surprised to see the well-dressed stranger from the Gala standing on her porch. She invited him in out of politeness more than anything else, offering him tea, apologizing for the modest state of her small living room. Alessandro sat across from her, studying every detail of her face, searching for some flicker of recognition. There was none. "I have to ask," Clara said, setting down 2 cups of tea, "why does a man like you take such interest in an old piano teacher?" Alessandro chose his words carefully. He was not ready to tell her everything, not yet. Instead, he told her the truth in pieces. He told her the melody she played at the gala was one he recognized from long ago, one that meant a great deal to him. He asked, gently, if she remembered where she had learned it. Clara's expression grew troubled. She rubbed her temple, the way someone does when trying to grasp something just out of reach. I don't know, she admitted softly. I have played that song for as long as I can remember, but I couldn't tell you who taught it to me. Strange, isn't it? There are so many pieces of my past I simply cannot recall. The doctors told me long ago I suffered an injury, many years back, before I can remember. Whatever happened to me erased almost everything before it. I have tried for years to piece it together, but there is only fog where my memory should be. Alessandro's heart ached listening to her. He wanted desperately to tell her everything right then, to explain who she was to him, who he was to her, the life they had built together and lost. But something held him back. He feared that if he moved too fast, he would frighten her away, or worse, that she simply would not believe him. Instead, he asked if he could see her again. Clara hesitated, studying him with quiet curiosity. There was something in his eyes, an intensity she could not explain, that made her feel oddly comfortable rather than afraid. I suppose that would be all right, she said finally. Over the following weeks, Alessandro visited her often. He brought old photographs he had kept hidden away in a locked drawer for over 2 decades, pictures of the harbor where they used to walk, of the little bakery where they met, careful never to include his own face at first, testing gently to see if any of it stirred something in her. He told her stories, framing them as things he had heard from a friend rather than confessing they were his own memories. He took her to the harbor itself one evening, walking slowly beside her along the water. Clara admired the photographs politely. She listened to his stories with warm interest. She enjoyed their walks together, finding an unexpected comfort in his company. But nothing sparked. No flash of memory crossed her face. No sudden recognition changed her eyes. She remained, in every way that mattered to her own mind, a woman meeting a kind stranger for the first time. Alessandro told himself to be patient. Memories, he reasoned, could not be forced. They had to return in their own time. He continued visiting her, week after week, holding on to hope even as that hope grew heavier with each visit that ended the same way it began, with Clara's gentle, grateful, unknowing smile. 3 months passed, and Alessandro's visits to Clara's small house became a quiet ritual neither of them spoke about directly, but both looked forward to. He learned the small things about her, the things that had nothing to do with the past he was trying to unlock. She liked her tea with too much honey. She hummed under her breath while she graded her students' practice sheets. She laughed easily, a warm, familiar sound that struck something deep in Alessandro's chest every single time, even though she had no idea why her laughter affected him so deeply. He had not told her the full truth. Not yet. Every time he came close, the words caught in his throat. How could he explain that he was not simply a kind stranger, but the man she had once promised to marry? How could he explain that somewhere, 25 years ago, they had created a life together that vanished the night she disappeared? He feared her reaction. He feared she would think him mad, or worse, that she would pull away entirely, frightened by a past too large and too painful to accept. So instead, he continued gently. He brought her to the church where she used to play on Sundays, now old and quiet, its pews mostly empty. He watched her walk down the aisle, running her fingers along the wood, a strange, wistful expression crossing her face. This place feels familiar, she said softly, almost to herself. I don't know why. Alessandro's heart leapt. Do you remember anything? He asked, careful to keep his voice steady. Clara shook her head slowly, frustration flickering across her features. No. Just a feeling. Like something happened here that mattered. I hate this, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. Not knowing. Feeling like half of my life is a locked room I cannot open. Alessandro wanted to take her hand right then and tell her everything, but he held back, worried the timing was wrong. Instead, he simply sat beside her in the quiet church, offering his presence as comfort, the way he wished someone had offered him comfort during his own 25 years of grief. Weeks later, encouraged by a doctor Clara occasionally consulted about her condition, Alessandro accompanied her to an appointment, posing as a close friend. The doctor, an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner, reviewed her case carefully, listening to Clara describe the recent flickers of familiarity she had experienced, the church, the harbor, the melody she could not stop playing. These feelings are common, the doctor explained gently, even years after the type of injury Clara suffered. Emotional memory can sometimes remain even when factual memory is lost. It is possible, though not guaranteed, that certain triggers, sounds, places, powerful emotional experiences, could help pieces return. And if they don't? Clara asked quietly. The doctor's expression softened with sympathy. After this many years, I want to be honest with you both. It is possible that some memories may never fully return. The brain heals in its own way, on its own timeline. I don't say this to discourage you, only so you understand there are no guarantees. Clara nodded, accepting the words with a quiet, practiced calm that told Alessandro this was not the first time she had heard something similar. But later, walking her back to the car, he noticed her eyes were red, her composure cracking slightly at the edges. I'm tired of forgetting, she admitted softly. I'm tired of feeling like a stranger in my own life. Alessandro stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Every instinct told him this was the moment, that he should tell her everything right now, standing outside a doctor's office on an ordinary afternoon. But instead, he simply took her hand, gently, the first time he had done so since finding her again. You are not a stranger, he said quietly. Not to everyone. I promise you that. Clara looked up at him, confusion and something else, something warmer, flickering behind her eyes. She did not pull her hand away. That night, Alessandro sat alone in his study once more, staring at the two halves of the locket he kept locked away in his desk drawer, the one piece of Clara's past he had never shown her, the one piece that connected not only to their lost love, but to the child they had lost as well. He made a decision then. He would not force her memories through conversation or persuasion alone. He would recreate the moment that first brought them back together. He would give her a stage, a piano, and their song, and he would let the music itself try to do what words could not. Alessandro began planning the second charity gala within days. He told his staff it was simply a continuation of the foundation's work, another evening to raise money for the children's hospital wing his family funded every year. Only Renzo knew the real reason behind it, and even he kept his questions to himself, sensing the fragile hope his boss was carrying. Alessandro visited Clara personally to invite her, choosing his words with care. I would like you to perform again, he said, sitting across from her in her small living room. The same piece you played last time, if you're willing. Clara tilted her head, studying him. Why does that particular song matter so much to you, Alessandro? You've never explained it. He hesitated, his hand tightening slightly around his teacup. It reminds me of someone I loved very much, he said finally, choosing honesty without yet revealing everything. Someone I lost a long time ago. Something softened in Clara's expression. She reached over and placed her hand gently over his. I'm sorry, she said quietly. That kind of loss never really leaves, does it? No, Alessandro agreed, his voice rough. It doesn't. She agreed to perform, moved by the sincerity in his voice even though she still did not understand its true source. Alessandro left her house that evening with a mixture of hope and fear churning inside him, uncertain whether he was giving her a gift or preparing to break both their hearts all over again if the music failed to do what he prayed it would. Meanwhile, across the city, a young singer named Valentina sat in her apartment scrolling through news coverage of the first gala she had missed. She had built a modest but growing career over the past several years, known for her warm voice and the raw emotion she brought to every performance. She had cancelled her appearance at Alessandro's first gala due to a sudden family emergency, something she still felt guilty about months later, especially after reading how the evening had gone on without her, how an unknown pianist had stepped in and left the entire room in tears. Valentina reached out to the event coordinator, requesting to be included in the foundation's next gala as a way of making things right. She had heard whispers about Alessandro Fabri, about his reputation, his wealth, the shadow of his family's past that still followed him through certain circles. But she had also heard he was generous with his charity work, and she respected that enough to want to contribute properly this time. Her request reached Alessandro's desk just as he finished arranging the final details of the evening. He agreed without hesitation, distracted by the larger matter weighing on his mind. He had no idea, as he approved her participation with a simple signature, that the decision would eventually unravel the greatest mystery of his life. As the night of the second gala approached, Alessandro found himself more anxious than he had been in decades, more anxious even than the night he had first proposed to Clara by the harbor. He rehearsed what he would say to her if the music worked, and he rehearsed, just as carefully, what he would say if it did not. Renzo found him standing alone on the balcony of his estate the evening before the gala, staring out at the city lights. You fought wars, boss, Renzo said quietly, standing beside him. Faced down men twice your size without blinking. Never seen you this nervous. This is different, Alessandro admitted. This isn't a war I can win with strength or money. This is something I can't control at all. Renzo nodded slowly, understanding more than his words let on. Whatever happens tomorrow, you did everything you could. That has to count for something. Alessandro said nothing, only continued watching the city below, praying silently that after 25 years of silence, the melody they once wrote together would finally have something more to say. The following evening, the ballroom filled once again with guests, chandeliers glittering overhead, the low hum of conversation filling the air. Alessandro stood near the stage this time, refusing to stay hidden at the back of the room. Clara arrived shortly after, dressed simply and elegantly, her silver hair pinned the same careful way it had been the night they first found each other again. She caught his eye across the room and offered a small, warm smile, unaware that everything Alessandro had built toward this moment now rested entirely on the notes she was about to play. The ballroom quieted as Clara took her seat at the piano once more. Alessandro stood only a few steps away this time, close enough to see the slight tremble in her hands as she rested her fingers on the keys. He held his breath. She began to play. The first notes rose gently into the air, the same melody as before, familiar and soft. Alessandro watched her closely, searching her face for any sign of change. For a moment, nothing happened. She played the way she always played, technically graceful, but distant, performing a song she still did not understand the meaning of. Then, somewhere in the middle of the piece, her fingers hesitated. It was barely noticeable, a fraction of a pause between two notes, but Alessandro saw it immediately. Clara's brow furrowed. Her breathing changed, becoming slightly uneven. She continued playing, but something in her expression had shifted, as though she were no longer simply performing, but reaching for something just beyond her grasp. A memory flickered behind her eyes. A young man's face, smiling at her from across a bakery counter, coffee cup in hand, laughing at something foolish he had said. She did not know why the image appeared, only that it felt warm, familiar, achingly real. Her fingers kept moving. Another memory surfaced, brighter this time. Laughter, echoing along a harbor at sunset, two voices intertwined, careless and young. She felt her chest tighten, though she could not explain why tears were beginning to gather in her eyes. The music continued, and so did the memories, arriving faster now, each note pulling another fragment free from wherever it had been hidden for 25 years. A ring, offered to her beneath a sky full of stars. A voice, trembling slightly as it asked her to spend the rest of her life with him. Her own voice, answering yes before he could even finish the question. Her hands began to shake more visibly now, but she did not stop playing. She could not stop. The melody had become something more than music, a key finally turning inside a locked door that had remained shut for a quarter of a century. She remembered being pregnant, resting her hand gently over her stomach, imagining a small life growing inside her, imagining a future full of everything she had ever wanted. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks now, falling onto the piano keys as her fingers continued their trembling dance across them. The guests around the ballroom noticed, a hush falling over the room as they watched the pianist's quiet, private grief unfold in front of them, though none of them understood its true depth. Alessandro took a small step closer, his own eyes burning with unshed tears, watching 25 years of longing finally begin to break open in front of him. Clara's hands stopped. The final note hung in the air, unfinished, as she sat frozen at the piano, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her eyes wide with the weight of everything crashing back into her mind at once. Slowly, she lifted her gaze from the keys, scanning the crowded room until her eyes found him. The room remained utterly silent, every guest holding their breath, sensing they were witnessing something far beyond an ordinary performance. Alessandro, Clara whispered. His name, spoken with recognition rather than politeness for the first time in 25 years, broke something loose in his chest. He crossed the remaining distance between them in only a few steps, and Clara rose from the piano bench, her legs unsteady beneath her. He caught her as she nearly stumbled, wrapping his arms around her the way he had ached to for a quarter of a century. "I remember," she said, sobbing quietly into his shoulder. "I remember everything. The bakery. The harbor. Our song. Alessandro, I remember you." "I never stopped waiting," he whispered back, his own voice breaking. "Not for one single day." Around them, the crowd erupted into quiet, tearful applause, though neither Alessandro nor Clara noticed. For the first time in 25 years, they simply held each other, the missing piece of both their lives finally restored, standing together in the middle of a ballroom full of strangers who had just witnessed a love story returned from the dead. But as the applause slowly settled and the two of them finally stepped back to look at one another, Neither of them yet knew that the most important reunion of the evening had not happened yet. The ballroom slowly settled back into its evening rhythm, though the air still carried the weight of what everyone had just witnessed. Alessandro guided Clara to a quiet table near the stage, holding her hand as if letting go might somehow undo the miracle that had just occurred. She clung to him just as tightly, still overwhelmed, still absorbing the flood of memories that had returned to her all at once. "There's so much I need to tell you," Alessandro said softly, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "So much time we lost." "Then tell me everything," Clara whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Before he could begin, the event coordinator approached the stage to introduce the evening's second performer. Valentina walked out under the soft stage lights, dressed in a deep blue gown, her dark hair falling in soft waves. She smiled warmly at the crowd, thanking them for their patience and expressing how honored she felt to finally be part of an evening she had missed the first time around. Alessandro barely paid attention at first, his focus still entirely on Clara beside him. But as Valentina adjusted the microphone, something caught the light around her neck, a small pendant catching the glow of the chandeliers above. Clara's breath caught. "That necklace," she said quietly, gripping Alessandro's arm. He looked more closely. The pendant was small, oddly shaped, clearly only half of something larger. His heart began to pound as a distant memory stirred, one he had buried alongside all the others. "I had one just like it," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Before I disappeared. I remember now. I was given a locket after giving birth. It had two halves, meant to be split, one for the mother, one for the child. Mine disappeared along with my baby. I never understood what happened to either of them until this very moment." Alessandro's hand moved instinctively to his jacket pocket, where he had carried the second half of that very locket every single day for over 2 decades, a piece of the daughter he believed he would never find, kept close as the only physical proof that she had ever existed. He pulled it out slowly, his fingers trembling as he held it up to the light. The two of them rose from the table together, moving toward the stage as Valentina finished her opening remarks. Alessandro asked, his voice unsteady, if he could speak with her for a moment. Valentina, sensing the emotional weight in his expression, agreed immediately, stepping aside from the microphone. "That necklace," Alessandro said carefully, gesturing toward the pendant around her neck. "Would you mind if I asked where you got it?" Valentina's hand rose instinctively to touch the small pendant. "It was left with me," she explained. "I was adopted as an infant. My parents were told it was the only item found with me, the only connection to my birth family. I've worn it my whole life, even though I never learned what it meant." Clara stepped forward then, holding out the matching half with trembling hands. Valentina's eyes widened as she looked between the two pieces, the shapes fitting together perfectly, forming a single, complete image once joined, a small engraved sun that had once symbolized new beginnings. The three of them stood together on the stage, guests around the ballroom watching in stunned silence, sensing they were witnessing something even greater than the reunion they had seen only moments earlier. In the weeks that followed, a private DNA test confirmed what all three of them had already begun to feel in their hearts. Valentina was their daughter, taken from Clara during the same violent night 25 years ago, placed quietly into the adoption system by the very people responsible for Clara's kidnapping, erasing any trace that could have connected mother and child ever again. The reunion was not without its tears, its questions, its long nights of catching up on 25 years of missed birthdays, missed milestones, and missed moments neither of them could ever fully reclaim. But what mattered most, Alessandro often said in the months that followed, was that they had found each other at all, against every possible odd. Alessandro Fabri, once known throughout the city only for the empire he built and the fear his name carried, slowly became known for something else entirely, a devoted husband to the woman he never stopped loving, and a proud father to the daughter he never knew he had lost. Clara and Alessandro married in a small, quiet ceremony months later, held at the same harbor where he had proposed to her 25 years before. Valentina sang for them that day, her voice carrying their old melody across the water, no longer a song of loss, but one of a family finally, completely whole. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us what part moved you the most. We have so many more heartfelt stories of love, loss, and second chances waiting for you. We hope to see you again very soon.